welcome to Wellness Watch. Today's Wellness Watch sessions comes from our Season 1 recordings from our live class platform, Learn It Live. I hope you enjoy this session today, and if you have any questions, be sure to put them in the comments below. I hope you'll also like and subscribe to our channel so you can find more information on herbal medicine, health, and wellness. I hope you enjoy the session today as we discuss food testing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Watch. I'm Jillian Karnick, and I have Annabelle Schreiber here with me today. How you doing, Annabelle?
Hi, good, thanks.
So sorry for having Wellness Watch at a little bit of a different time this week. We're going to be traveling this week for a variety of different events that you can see on some of our different social media platforms. But this week, we're going to be talking about food testing. So if you don't know me yet, again, my name is Jillian Karnick. I own and operate The Dancing Herbalist. I have a Master of Science degree in herbal medicine. I'm also a nutritionist, certified personal trainer, and exercise is medicine professional through the American College of Sports Medicine. The Dancing Herbalist focuses mostly on topical herbal products for joint and muscle pain and skin irritations. You also have the book, A Beginner's Guide to Wellness. So if you're looking to start out on your wellness path and find what works best for you, it's a great way to start there, in addition to taking these sessions and listening to Wellness Watch. We do also offer consultation services, so if you're interested in talking with either myself or Annabelle in more depth about your own experiences and challenges, you can feel free to contact us about our consultation services.
Hi, my name is Annabelle Schreiber. I'm the author of the Conscious Canary Chronicles, a pharmaceutical injury survivor, an avid plant-based food explorer, and a home herbalist and health advocate. So happy to join.
So if you really enjoy Wellness Watch, there's some other things you can get from The Dancing Herbalist as well. We do also have our free wellness newsletter that you can join at thedancingherbalist.com. When you're there, you can also find our herbal products there. And now that you're also on Learn It Live, we do have a variety of free and paid classes on Learn It Live for herbal medicine, wellness, herbal philosophy, plant identification, and a variety of other different things. And if after this session you have some other questions, the best way to be in touch with us is to contact us through our Facebook group, which is The Dancing Herbalist Herbies. That way you can get contact with the herbalist and other individuals who are learning about herbal medicine and wellness for themselves. We do have our schedule here. Again, we've had a little bit of changing for the dates for the food testing one, but next Wednesday at Is that Wednesday? Thank you. Wednesday the 27th at 3 p.m. we're going to be talking about my first herbs. So it's going to be fun. What was your first herb, Annabelle?
Dandelion.
I probably want to say my first one was really calendula. Yeah. So
Nice.
we got 2 aster flowers.
Oh, I know, right?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about those. We'll talk about some other herbs that we think are good ones for you to start with as well. But this week we're talking about food testing. So food testing to me is really about finding what foods work well for your body and what foods don't work well for your body. And unfortunately, it takes a long time.
It does. It does, and it also goes a little step further, at least in my experience, in that it's at different times. Foods that are good for your body at different times.
Yes.
So the more of a situation you're trying to deal with on a health related level, I think my experience requires you to eliminate more foods and then slowly add them back in as you become more stable.
Yeah, so there's 2 very different schools of thought, and both work, but different situations are more appropriate for when it comes to doing food elimination testing. So there's the idea of removing one food at a time and seeing if that one food made any difference.
Right.
Or the concept of removing everything at once and then slowly adding things back in.
Right.
And I definitely think for more complicated situations, the route of getting rid of everything is necessary. Not just a better idea, but is completely necessary.
Right. I find that to be true. Very, very much so. And it's almost strange. You seem to work from one side to the other, because even though I went through that process of eliminating everything, as I added back, I have to kind of go backwards at times.
Yeah.
And see like something's not going well, and I have to sort of go back into that journey of food elimination.
So getting rid of the hopes of getting rid of everything when you take that route is generally to fix all of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And some people will go for like a month and be like, I didn't do anything. I didn't solve my problems. It's not food related.
Mm.
In my experience, I think people start to notice changes. Some people might notice changes within a month, but I think most people will start to notice changes within 3 months, but it won't really like have long lasting changes until about 6 months of getting rid of everything.
I agree. It's very interesting, because I find that, I hear that a lot in community of people that are, trying to recover and heal, is that, I tried a healthy diet and it didn't work, and it takes a lot longer than people think.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can find some immediate things that people, obviously, I know a big community of people that have mast cell issues, which is histamine reactions to foods and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
You can take everything out and then you can try something, and within a few hours, to a few days, you can tell if that food is having a negative impact on you. But as far as like seeing the benefits, it takes a long time.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the irritant, or because it's not always an allergen, but whatever's causing irritation, it can take a long time for the body to heal itself. And if it hasn't healed properly, I mean, for some people, the whole concept of like leaky gut, this is one that was a real big buzz phrase a few years ago. But it takes time to actually heal your digestive system and to get rid of all the inflammation. So with some things, such as for some individuals, gluten seemed to be the one that most triggered, or was most triggered in response to a leaky gut syndrome. You have to repair all the leaky gut syndrome, and then you may no longer be triggered by it.
Right.
So getting rid of it helps you to repair, and then you may be able to reintroduce the foods again. But that's not always the case.
No.
And the downside to this process is that if you haven't fully repaired your digestive system, and then you even have it just once, you got to start the whole process over again.
Right. Right, you do. And it's, I find it seems to be that also points out, like when we take a food out and we take everything out, I happen to think that one of the optimum paths to health is fasting when, we're in a very sick place. I was talking about this with a friend, that when you see an animal in nature and they're sick, they go and they rest and they go through a fasting period. And whenever we don't have a lot going on in our system, it gives our body time to take a break, work on digestion, work on absorption, utilization, elimination. And, it gives our body needs simple, soft support whenever we're going through a healing crisis, so to speak.
Yeah, and there's lots of different ways to do healthy methods of fasting, and starving yourself is not one of them.
No, I think that's a big thing that we're confused about.
That's why I wanted to make sure I say that.
Right.
We have a four-legged visitor. right now.
And even when you are doing fasting, I think it's an art that people need to understand very well, because even how you break a fast is very important. So just saying, oh, I'm just not going to eat for a few days, or we were actually talking about, my friend and I this morning, about dry fasting, and they're like, well, how long can you do that before you get really, because when you're out in the wild, and we watch these Survivor series, and they're like, if you don't have water in 3 days, that's it. So we were talking about dry fasting and how people can make themselves even worse if they don't know what they're doing with fasting.
Yeah, this is exactly the time where there's a lot of benefit to doing it, but you really need someone to be working with you. And
at the very least, really have an understanding. And again, what you were talking about with eliminating foods, whichever side of that you decide to do, this is a process that takes time. It's not
huge
a quick
amounts of time.
fix.
And this is the biggest thing I see. The unfortunate thing, especially I see it with people who have dairy, are doing this with dairy. Because while I do have dairy myself, I'm very conscious of what I have for dairy, and I make sure to be having like dairy-based products that are not going to irritate my system in one way or another. But for so many people, they will get bloated or have gas or things like this with any kinds of dairy, and it's almost like an addiction, because with dairy, that feeling of fullness after eating is just a kind of inflammation. And we get used to that. And if we don't have that, there is an assumption that we haven't had enough to eat.
Right.
And this leads to a bit of a craving for dairy. This is a very common thing. And the smallest amount of dairy will set off this kind of inflammation reaction for individuals. And if you are doing a food elimination diet and eliminating dairy, the smallest amount, even in bread, for instance, like not even if you're having butter, but just a small amount of butter that went into making it, can be the irritating factor that sets you back 3 months in your healing process.
For sure.
And it doesn't really matter how much dairy there is, just that there is dairy.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because whenever it comes to, well, dairy is definitely something that I eliminated some time ago. But when we talk about cravings, I think that's another big part. Oh, I don't even think, I know that's another big part of the whole elimination diet deal. And so this is really a multi-dimensional thing. A lot of people don't really, and I certainly didn't when I first started it, understand that this process is more than just eliminating a food or foods. So cravings in particular, a lot of times if you're already in a compromised health position or issue, you're obviously going to be struggling with fungus. You're going to be struggling with parasites, being out of balance in the body. These things belong in the body in the right balance. So a lot of times those cravings are really difficult to get through, because literally you have something that is wanting to be fed inside of you.
Yep.
And also there's a lot of emotion when it comes to our foods. How many of us, even myself included, oh my gosh, yes, eat for comfort. Today I heard some kind of bad news, and I was like getting ready to make my breakfast choice. And I was like, I think I'm going with dates and bananas, and I'm gonna wait to do the papaya because I want some comfort. And so one thing I found when I did do stuff with eliminating foods was I was surprised about how much of an emotional process it was for me to eliminate foods.
One of the things that I always do before I start an elimination diet is find what those comfort foods are that still fit within my food choices that I have available to me. So one of my probably most common ones that I reach for is potatoes.
Oh, yeah.
And there's definitely a lot of individuals that probably shouldn't have potatoes for one reason or another. They are in the same family as tomatoes and eggplants, and that this whole family is not something that everyone can eat from.
Right.
But potatoes are a comfort food for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And they're a good thing to have around just in case you need a little feeling of support from your food. Because food, there's a lot of people who use food as a coping mechanism for a lot of things. I mean, if you feel full in your stomach, you feel full in your heart. And that's good and bad. There's times to do it and times to not do that. But when it particularly comes to cravings, I think you're exactly right in saying that, like, there's something inside of you that's trying to feed, that needs something, and it causes you to have these cravings. And sometimes they can be the emotional cravings as well. But the thing that I always try to remember is look at what I am craving and being like, what is in that food that I might be missing?
Right, something like minerals or things of that nature. Right, yeah.
And I've gone back because when I was vegan back in February, it was only one thing that I kept being like, I really want this. I really want this. I really want this. It was eggs. And I still haven't had eggs.
Interesting.
And once I brought those other foods back in, I did whatever I was missing was in something else, and I haven't had eggs yet still.
It's very interesting. When I was going on a journey off of when I was getting onto the plant-based diet fully, the last thing that I was that I struggled giving up was eggs. I didn't realize how much of a stimulant eggs were for my thyroid. And so just my energy level in general. So I started paying attention to that, and that's whenever I discovered the beauty of things like holy basil that gave me a nice boost, and moringa, and I was able to start focusing a little bit more on thyroid, and then I was able to take the eggs out. But the other part of the elimination that I think gets very people don't understand very well and frightens a lot of people is the crash.
You're talking about like an energy crash, an emotional crash?
There's always a crash, whether it's one or the other. But usually whenever you are doing an elimination, you're taking something out that your body is having a hard time processing. And so naturally the body goes into detoxification because it wants to now get out the stuff that had been getting in it that it didn't want. And the reason people have symptoms in their body is because something is coming into the body that the body does not want inside of it, or something is inside of the body that doesn't belong there that needs to come out.
Yeah, one of the most common things that happens, especially it happens with any kind of dieting or changing of food where weight loss ends up happening, because if we've been eating all the bad foods, all the bad food is what's been stored in our fat cells.
Right.
So as we start to break down those fat cells, all the bad stuff starts to come out.
Exactly.
So this is why a lot of people get like skin rashes and even like hair loss and things like this from dieting, because there's other things that also go into the hair loss, skin irritations, but a lot of it is the breakdown of the fat cells that are just yucky stuff that's being held up in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Flu-like symptoms, fatigue, joint muscle pain.
A lot of that I think also comes from the from the detox, the rest, like the liver detoxing the body.
Mhm.
And especially if we end up getting a little bit of movement with it, because the reduction in inflammation means that our lymphatic system is going to flow a little bit more effectively, and stuff's going to break up and start moving.
Right.
Just like what I had happen 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Was I was significantly less inflamed after being vegan, and then I went and got a massage, and I think I had like a bacterial release of some sort, and I got a significant amount of pain as a response to it.
Right.
So just this detox processing, just getting stuff out, it can be physically painful.
Right. And I think that scares some people, and they say, I hear a lot of people say they tried a healthy diet and it didn't work, or they felt worse.
Yeah, the feeling worse, because it takes that long time. It takes 3 to 6 months at least to start actually cleaning out all of that stuff, so your body is healthy again, so that you can then start actually testing the food.
Right.
Because we haven't even talked about that. We're talking about just about getting rid of things and healing before we actually find out what the problem was.
Right.
We haven't even gotten there yet.
And I think that's one of the big reasons, that one of the most important tools of doing something like this, I have kind of like 2 of them, is 1, logging your journey.
Definitely.
So important. And then the other is, don't dive in the sense, like, again, remember, understand what to anticipate. And so give yourself the space to be able to do this.
Be forgiving of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whenever you talk about potatoes, I mean, the food I had the hardest time giving up, and once I now understanding the other part of testing the foods, I knew it wasn't doing me any good. I knew it was doing me bad, but man, it was just, I just couldn't give it up. And so potato chips, I mean, they just were, that was my comfort food. And I, did all the trying the ones made with coconut oil and GMO free and all of that. But at the end of the day, I knew it had to go. And so, and that's where I really started to learn that part of the emotional stuff that I was talking about.
Yeah. And when you are doing a food journal, because you didn't mention this, it's important to also track your emotional experiences as well. Right. And I tell people, when they're doing a food journal, you need to start before you make any changes, because you need to know what your baseline is.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
And so not only are you going to need to write down everything you eat and drink, I tell people, if you're taking any medicines, or if you're smoking or drinking alcohol, those things also need to be included.
Right.
And you need to write down what you're eating, when you're eating it, how you felt an hour beforehand, how you felt right after, and how you feel 2 hours later. That's writing something down about every hour all day long in this food journal.
Right. It's really labor intensive, and being forgiving with yourself there is, whenever I was very, very sick, there would just be a couple of days where I couldn't do a food journal. And those missing days, I just knew were just horrible. So all I could journal.
Yeah, you just remember it was bad. Just a bad day. Just a bad day. And the more you can put into your journal, the more you can look for patterns. Or really, I find that food journaling is most helpful with the more information you have. You can look to see different patterns. For me, it was really through food journaling that I noticed that it was wheat-based products that were causing me to have more fatigue.
Right.
And this is a really common thing I think people have, is fatigue with grains in general.
Absolutely.
But I hadn't really recognized it in myself. Like, I probably even knew it was a possibility, but it wasn't until I saw it and I saw the changes it was making in me that I could accept that it was something I didn't want.
Right.
And you can have someone else tell you these things all day long, but until you see it and understand it and notice it in yourself, you're not going to be able to empower yourself to make changes if you actually want changes.
Right. Yeah, that does help.
And that's, I think, the long run, the real benefit of food journaling is being able to empower yourself to make changes when you want to have a change. This can also be like, it doesn't have to just be like, I'm not going to eat something because it does this to me.
Mhm.
It also can be like, I'm going to eat this because it does this for me.
Oh my gosh, preach it, because it's so funny you said that. Whenever I got into this, and I was down to hardly any foods.
You had a list at one point in time of less than 40 things you would put into your mouth.
At one point it was 7.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I had seen this doctor, and he said, well, you have to eat bananas and sweet potatoes. And I said,
I remember this.
I said, okay, you don't know me, but my whole entire life and existence, if you'd asked me what are your 2 least favorite foods on the face of the planet, it would be bananas and sweet potatoes. And I got my first banana, and I just doused it in honey, because I mean, just the smell of it made me, feel nauseated. And I was like, oh my gosh, how in the world am I going to eat bananas? But I knew that he was right. I knew that I was really deficient. I knew that I needed it. So I just decided that I was just going to eat them until I loved them. And now I eat, sometimes 10 bananas in a day. So it really is on both sides of that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes I'll hear people say, oh, I could never do that. I don't like that. And I'm like, well, you'd be surprised what you can do whenever, your health is depending on it.
Yeah. And so we haven't even talked about like organic foods or like anything like that. Like this is completely different from that. But I remember when I also did not like bananas.
Mm.
And I very much remember trying to force myself to have bananas in college because I needed the potassium. Like I knew I needed the potassium because I was doing a lot of dancing, and I just did not like bananas. And I don't think it was until I was in graduate school that I had an organic banana.
Oh, yes. Right.
And I was amazed at how different it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was different in its texture, different in its taste, smell and colors, everything. And right. I never have thought that organic food was that different, other than its nutritional value and its lack of pesticides and herbicides and all of those things. I never thought the actual culinary experience was extremely different until I had an organic banana.
Sure.
Because when I think of like the clean 15 that I'm going to not worry so much if I'm having conventionally grown or not, but then the dirty dozen, and I'm gonna make sure the dirty dozen, which are the really highly sprayed, pesticide-ridden foods, those I'm gonna seek out more organic. Mm. Bananas are on the clean 15, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about bananas and trying to get them organic. It didn't seem to be like one of the things I should focus on. But wow, it made a difference. That 20 cents more a pound was so worth it because they taste better. You have to try all of these different options. You can't just say, this is what I'm going to stick with. You can't just say that. And you got to try different things. I think that's one of the other big things about food testing is trying new foods.
Well, it's testing, and you have to
it's true.
You like an experiment.
Yeah, and even now I'll try to, even if I'm not trying a new fruit or vegetable or thing like that each week, I try to at least make one new dish a week. Yeah. Because another big part of this is learning to cook. Really if you don't know how to cook, there's a free class on the Dancing Herbalist Learn It Live for you to try out, because learning to cook, unless you know the basics of cooking, you're never going to be able to take your own food-related health and wellness into your own hands. You're always going to be at the mercy of someone else.
And even more than just cooking, your food processing. Because I don't cook, much these days because I eat
Cooking,
mostly
referring
raw.
to putting heat into
Right.
it. I include processing in the
But
but yes.
It's very interesting because I see, there's a lot of foods I hadn't tried before. And I was talking about this actually the other day with another friend, and they said that they now have tried to develop the mentality to not say that they don't like any particular kind of food, but that they will say, I don't care for that type of food this way. Because there's so many different ways that you can prepare something like a beet or a banana.
Like so many people don't like steamed Brussels sprouts.
Right.
And I'm okay with the people that don't like steamed Brussels sprouts. But if you haven't tried caramelized Brussels sprouts, you are missing out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's another way when we talk about the testing, is that you test the same thing in various methods. Always an experiment.
Definitely. And our tastes change over time too.
Absolutely.
As you detoxify your body, you're going to also have different bacteria growing in your mouth too. I mean, so that itself is going to change your experience of the food you're eating. And it's so much of us that we pay attention to the experience of our food in our mouth. We have to pay attention and listen to what's going on in our digestive system, and also pay attention to what's coming out the other end.
Absolutely.
We were talking about that last week.
And even your urine, not even just, you want to keep an eye on your body's ability.
This is something else that needs to go into your food journal, in my opinion. Yeah, it's something that you have to track right along with it.
Yeah, I used to track my bowel movements and what they were like and all of that. So I think, you want to have a comprehensive food journal that takes time, but you start to get really warmed up to it. Like, I don't keep a lot of a food journal now, but I can tell if there's something that I've put into the mix that I haven't had in a while. And I'm like, oh, that's still bothering me. I need to put it on the burner for a little bit.
Yeah.
Or I try it and I don't have any issue. Like, dates are a great example. I had a couple of dates a few years ago and the paramedics were on the way. Now I eat 8 dates sometimes in a day, but I had to go back and like retest that food. And then sometimes I'm just not ready yet.
For me, the food that I'm always testing is bell peppers. And bell peppers in particular are something that, while conventionally grown bell peppers are definitely genetically modified, you can get organic bell peppers that are not genetically modified, but they are definitely highly selectively bred over time, because that is the classic bell pepper is not what peppers looked like 400 or 500 years ago.
Right.
We were very different. And with this selective breeding, what I learned, this was through a plant pathology class. So the average herbalist, botanist person doesn't know a lot about this, but there is one particular mold that will grow on bell peppers that causes food irritation, bloating, gas, kinds of things. And it's the mold, it's not the peppers.
Right.
So and this happens even on organic peppers, because they're selectively bred. So they're still organic, but it's just a natural thing. And so it's not always the food that's causing the issue either. Sometimes there's something else about the food. So the freshness of the food can be very important, especially for me with bell peppers. It's mostly the freshness, but also the preparation method.
Right.
Can also cause irritation. This is again why the journaling and paying attention is so important. Because I'm sure for you in particular, because being raw right now, you soak a lot of things or you don't soak things. And I'm sure you have a vastly different experience of eating them when you do and don't. And one of the simplest things, I think,
currently the only person in this conference.
The average person will experience this with is beans, because so many people don't soak their beans. They just don't know to. A lot of people don't know to.
Absolutely.
But as soon as you soak your beans for even 24 hours, ideally 36 to 48, no longer have all of these ridiculous gas symptoms that people have. The gases will just escape from the beans through the soaking process. And mind you, you have to learn how to soak them properly so you don't accidentally kill yourself. Well, you're not going to kill yourself, but like you don't accidentally eat the bacteria or anything like that from them. But the preparation is just as important as what the food is for some foods.
Absolutely. And then if in your journaling, what I found is, I started noticing that particular foods were an issue. And so when I looked at this group of foods, I was like, okay, well, there's this group of foods. What is the primary makeup of this food? And what it came to was sulfur. I was having a difficult time with sulfur. So I was struggling with cruciferous vegetables, and things of that nature. And I was like, oh, okay. So I noticed that I did much better when I kept my diet more on the low sulfur side. So, and then, I'll get back to putting sulfur foods, but that just means that I have too much of that in me right now, and I need to get the excess sulfur out. And so adding more and more and more continues those symptoms. So, I mean, it's also picking out that pattern or that grouping. And that's how some people identify that they have a hard time with nightshade vegetables that you made reference to.
Yep, the tomatoes and eggplants and potatoes.
But also one thing I noticed with that was that I struggled with nightshades differently, whether they were cooked or raw.
I think that's the case for a lot of people with nightshades. It's also similar for people that have problems with rose fruits, like apples, peaches, and pears.
Right.
But it's also cooked. Sometimes the cooking of those will really reduce the issue people have with them. And same thing with the nightshades.
Yeah. I mean, that's, my body tends to do better with raw foods right now. And that's one thing I think about the whole food testing deal is, like I said earlier, is understanding that this is an ever-changing process, And so I used to get really caught up on, and I see a lot of people do this,
in this conference.
and in different healing groups or different groups of people that are struggling with these issues. I'll hear them say, "Well, I'm the histamine diet or the GAPS diet or the this or the that," and I'm like, "Wow, I spent years." Chasing my tail, trying to find the diet, and it just doesn't work that way.
You got to start and pay attention and find what works for you, because we are all unique individuals. We all have unique bacteria in our digestive system.
Right.
We all have very unique synapses in our minds that make us experience things differently.
Right.
We all have different nerve endings in our digestive system to get different pains and irritations from different things. We are all extremely different. And it's all about learning what works for you. And not just what works for you, because knowing your irritations, symptoms of what you eat or don't eat should also be what you then use that information to make the choices if you want to or don't want to eat something. Because even if you do have an irritation to something, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to eat it. It means you get to decide if you want to eat it or not based on the experience you will have from it.
Well, and then also if you eat something that is good for you, like an apple. I mean, the old saying of an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
I personally like an onion a day keeps the doctor away.
I like that one too.
Yeah, I like the onion a day.
But if you eat something like that, I don't think there's many human beings that aren't supposed to be able to eat a good, normal apple and get sick or have a difficult time taking it in. So if you do, one of the things I started doing that made a big difference for me was saying, okay, well, when I eat an apple, my stomach gets really upset. Why? Why is my body doing this? And then as I learned about apples, I learned that they're a natural gut modulator. So that upset tummy feeling was actually the apple trying to do what it's supposed to do, which
Yep.
is regulate my gut bacteria. So then I knew to stick with it for a little bit and see it through, and then I could eat an apple fine and I didn't have an issue with it. So if you know something is good for you, then it's like, okay, well, why is my body doing this? But then we have the stuff that we know is not good for us, and those are always my more challenging.
And I think a lot of what we know isn't good for us, we know it's not good for us.
Right.
We don't have to look at a food journal to tell us
Right.
we're not supposed to have fried chicken. I mean, like we know this, but again, you can make that choice, and empowering yourself to be able to make a choice, I think, is the best thing you can do for yourself.
Right. I agree.
Because you get to choose if you learn about your body or not. You get to choose if you want to heal yourself. But if you aren't empowered enough to make that choice, nothing else will come after it.
Right.
And
also the choice of indulgence. So for myself, whenever I'm going to choose to indulge in something that I know my body doesn't really like too much, but I happen to really love it, like when you made my birthday cake, and I knew that I should not be eating coconut oil and cashews on that level.
it's a lot of coconut oil and cashew.
So I was empowered to make a decision, and I said, okay, I'm going to engage in this indulgence. That said, I know that this is an indulgence. So after this, tomorrow, I'm going to eat mostly fruit, and I'm going to help my system get clear of my festivities of the night.
And that same thing, you were empowered to make that choice.
Right.
You knew what to do.
Right.
And so much of food testing is empowering yourself and learning about your body. And the easy part, which may not always be the most easy part physically, is retrying new foods once you've gotten rid of them. Because you do need to get rid of a lot of things for a good amount of time for your body to heal. And you don't want to start bringing new foods or foods you got rid of back in and trying them until you have healed.
Right.
Because otherwise you're just going to irritate the problem and you won't have a good, clear understanding of your symptoms from eating that food.
I mean, even a minimum of 3 days of, I think, because what I find is people say, well, I ate it yesterday. I'm like, well, you need to at least wait 3 days after you eat something to see if you're really something new.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So like after that 6 months of not having had anything and trying a new food.
3 days.
3 days. Yes, definitely. And especially don't test more than one thing a week.
Right. Or one thing at a time.
Definitely not one thing at a time.
Which we know I loved to do.
And now when we say one thing at a time, we're talking about whole foods.
Right.
Because it's not like having a cracker. Because a cracker's got 30 ingredients. Well, some might have 5. But
right.
But still, you have one whole food at a time. And the harder part is maybe getting a clean diet that doesn't have colorings and pesticides and things like that in it in the first place. But the whole food testing is what you have to do. You can't say, I'm testing a cracker. You can't test a whole chip. Well, I'm trying, that's just like potatoes and salt. Well, okay, a good potato chip is just potatoes and salt, but they're not all. So you have to test based on whole foods. And then even if you have, let's say you've had potato, salt, and olive oil, and then you go buy a potato chip that is just those 3 ingredients. You might have a reaction to the potato chip that you didn't have to those ingredients alone. So it's not just as specific as testing the individual foods, but testing food combinations, and especially if you're going and buying potato chips, testing that processing, because different companies will have different amounts of processing. I know one really good company, Amy's. They have a lot of frozen foods. I believe they're mostly vegetarian, but I can't eat anything from that company.
Yeah. I mean, it's also how it's packaged.
For me, it's either the packaging or something about their processing, but I know that I get an upset stomach anytime I have anything from that company. And it doesn't matter what. It's been everything.
That's why I think the whole food diet is just optimum. I mean, the less processed food we have, the better.
Yep.
Just across the board. So I think if you're going to do an elimination diet, you're not going to do yourself any favors if you don't go on a whole food basis.
Yeah, there's no real way. There's too many things in processed foods to really be able to understand what's going on. And that first process of just recording everything and slowly paying attention to what you're eating, some people will get bored, and I'm not bored, but lazy, and won't want to write down all the ingredients on that box of crackers. And this is when you start making your own crackers yourself, because you know all the ingredients, so you can write them all down. And I think when you are food journaling, if you are not eating a whole foods diet, that writing down the brand names of things, if you are doing that, is really important. So if you do need to go back and look at something, you can.
Yeah, because I mean, for myself, I would think that I had read the label. I would have double and triple checked the label, and then I would get back and I would eat something and have a reaction and look at the label again and go, oh, it had so-and-so in it, which I know creates an issue. The ginger.
Like the pumpkin seeds.
Oh, the pumpkin seeds, yes. Yeah, very much. So, which I actually did have a reaction to.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of soy, which made me cry for like 3 days. I had a lot of, I had a lot of the regular autism type issues that I deal with were more heightened.
And if you haven't been practicing and paying attention to your body, it's really hard to see that something like that can affect just your emotions like that. And I know for myself that it took a while for me to get a good name for it. But while for the most part I don't have a problem with wheat or gluten, I've now come to find that
sodium bromide.
Yeah, sodium bromide, I think it was.
Yeah, that's the one, bromide. Yeah. You can actually see when bromide is trying to get out of your body. But it almost looks like
The only person in this conference.
How interesting.
Yeah, you can see it if you try to detox yourself, which I went through off of bread, when I went off of bread. And a significant amount of people that I've met that have done the same thing. It was amazing. You could literally see the bread trying to work its way out.
So for me, the symptom that I noticed with sodium bromide is that I was getting paranoid.
Oh yeah.
It was very uniquely that. Like I would get tired with bread products, but if I ended up having, I found that I was still tired with bread products that didn't have sodium bromide in them, but particularly the sodium bromide causing this paranoia that like it is a unique experience, and everybody has different things like that. And
it's one thing that really worries me about there being such a high, such a significant increase of anxiety and depression these days, other than just the high stress that we're all under.
Absolutely.
So many of these things I think are food related, and it's very easy to miss it because people don't think that all of these emotional reactions and experiences, these mental changes, can be related to food.
Well, we don't have a holistic culture in the sense that our physical health and our mental health tend to be treated on two separate different levels. And I mean, even when I first started my food journaling, which was like 4 years ago, I didn't include in there my moods. I didn't really understand the significance of the food I ate in accordance with my mental health.
Yep.
So I really actually didn't understand that aspect until I learned that I was autistic, which was in my late 30s. So then I started going, oh, these foods here. And, you know, I really became much more aware of it. I had a girlfriend call me one time, and she was just beside herself. You know, she was like, I'm in the bathroom crying. And I just, you know, she just was breaking down and just having a huge meltdown. And, you know, I could very much empathize with that. And, you know, she asked me, she said, I just, you know, I don't know what's happened to me. And I knew that she had been, you know, working on her diet and taking a lot of things out. And so I asked her, I said, well, okay, what did you eat last night? And she said all of her stuff, and she said, and I had a piece of chocolate cake. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go.
Yep.
And it ended up, you know, that she was, not that our emotions are not valid, and that, you know, she certainly had some life situations that were overwhelming, but the absolute inability to deal with it without having panic attacks and meltdowns and things of that nature, I think really, really comes down to a lot of the food that we're eating.
Yep.
So when I had that soy, I mean, my partner was like, I don't know what happened to you, but something definitely did. And that's one thing, again, is, you know, when you look at a group of foods, you start to see how they impact you. And I found that I didn't do well on high estrogenic foods like soy, things of that nature. So I know if I'm going to have something that's like that, whether even it's an herb, that I just go on the lower end. You know, I only do a small amount. But again, this is, you know, when I did food journaling, I started getting much more, the more results I had, the more journaling I did.
Yeah.
So then I started journaling about the herbs I was using and the, you know, all of this. But nowadays they have so many apps, like Chronometer. Have you ever seen Chronometer?
I have not. Is that the one, the red one you use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's an area on there that you can keep a little diary. So if you don't want to write, you know, you can use these apps. They also help me see, you know, the minerals and vitamins and things I was getting in
this conference.
And then I could say, oh, I'm definitely not getting enough, you know, zinc or what have you. So I need to increase something here.
Yeah.
So I don't know, food testing, I feel like it needs to be a fun and experimental way of being.
Yeah, and I think once you start adding foods back in, it can be, but you have to remember when you add foods back in, it may not be a fun experience.
Right.
I remember a close friend of mine, I had convinced him to not have gluten for a month. This was probably a little bit of a, I bet you can't do it kind of thing. And he had a cookie after a month and came to me yelling because he vomited as a response to this cookie.
Absolutely.
And he's like, why did you do this to me? Now I can't eat cookies.
But you couldn't eat cookies before.
You just didn't realize you couldn't eat cookies before.
Right.
So it can be quick. It can be a very quick response like that. But there can be other things that it may not, you may not react to something. You may have a quick reaction, or you may have a reaction that takes a few days, as you were saying. Maybe like expect it to take up to 3 days to have a reaction, and then
don't try anything else new for a few days before you try a new thing. And when we're talking about new things, we're talking about, like, again, the whole foods. I mean, like an individual carrot. Now, you probably have not gotten rid of carrots, but like trying an individual kind of oil, or trying an individual thing from the Solanaceae family, from the nightshade family, just the tomatoes, or just the peppers, or just the potatoes.
And I would do a small amount.
Yeah. Well, I'm in debate on if I like the concept of a small amount or not, because if it's too small of an amount, you might not have a reaction to it. It might not be a noticeable reaction. And also, to some extent, if you have a larger amount and you have a larger reaction, you're going to remember it more. And it's going to encourage you to make that choice to have it or not more effectively.
That's very true. Very true. That's
I mean,
reasonable.
you are a very sensitive person. So to me, it makes complete sense that you should try things in very small amounts, like that time you had 1 tablespoon of bone broth.
Yeah. And a year later, I still wasn't recovered.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And I think, that is something too that we, won't really talk about much, but there is an aspect to this that requires us to, at least for me, I have to manage a certain level of fear, because you can start to develop fear with eating and with testing new foods, especially if you have really intensive reactions. It can be scary.
Yeah.
So this all factors into the balance of having mindful eating, being calm, not eating on the run, like helping your body be able to take in food the way it's supposed to. So there's definitely an aspect to that. But once you start on this road, so many things unfold and things come into play. Like I do meditation and things of that nature whenever I'm eating something and trying something new. Because the fear alone can give you a reaction.
It can. I mean, just think about it. I mean, it's a stress response. Stress response sets off inflammatory pathways in your body that the inflammation can cause irritation in your digestive system, which can create those gaps between your intestinal linings. More things will get absorbed, then you'll get an additional inflammatory response. It's a whole cycle. So staying calm is important.
It is. It really is.
So we're really coming to the end of our session today. I mean, we can talk about this forever. And is there any big important points that you want to bring up that we haven't touched on today, Annabelle?
Not particularly. I think we've hit everything. I'm always talking about balance, so that's what it always comes down to for me.
Yeah. So really, journal, pay attention, try not to stress, have your comfort foods ready. It takes a long time.
Right.
Only test one thing at a time. Be prepared for a reaction. There might not be one. And be sure to journal. Remember your mental health in all of this, not only for the way food may affect it, but also the way your mental health may affect your food eating process.
Absolutely.
I think that's all the big points we've touched on today.
Yeah, it's great. Like you said, we could talk about this forever. So, but I think, just getting that whole philosophy, the Burroughs philosophy of what's at the end of your fork, that's definitely where this journey has begun for me. So anytime we can talk about food.
Well, thank you again for meeting with me today, Annabelle, for our Wellness Watch. I really appreciate it. And if everyone listening has enjoyed this session and you want to keep seeing more of Wellness Watch, be sure to head over to our Patreon page where you can help support us continuing Wellness Watch. You do also get access to our blogs early for only $1 a month with our Patreon page. And again, we're sure to come to the Dancing Herbalist Herbies Facebook page if you have any questions that you want to chat with us about, not during a session. And next week, we'll be meeting on Wednesday the 27th at 3 p.m. And we'll be talking about our favorite herbs, no, our first herbs, not our
yes.
favorite herbs. Well, I mean, probably some overlap.
Yeah.
But thank you all so much for joining us, and have a happy and healthy week.
Thank you.